Welcome to the Media Roundtable Special Edition, where we dive deep into the secrets of the craft of audio advertising from the perspective of the Chief Audio Officer. That is the person who is responsible for the success of their audio program within an organization. I am your host, Dan Granger, CEO and founder of Oxford Road, and we have a very special program for you today because it's a rebroadcast of a conversation that we had, fireside chat, at a Chief Audio Officer event in San Francisco that we held last month. It was our Measurement Forum. We were talking all about attribution, everybody's favorite subject. But then we capped the roundtable discussion of about, 15 different brands and marketers with a fireside chat that I got to have with Jason Calacanis. Now, if you don't know Jason, you should. He's been in the game for a very long time. In fact, I actually co-hosted a show called This Week in Marketing close to 14 years ago on his This Week in network. He's been doing his show the whole time. So you've probably heard of him through This Week in Startups. He also is the driving force behind the All In Pod, which has been a sensation, clearly the biggest podcast reaching people in the tech community. But Jason's not just a content creator. He is a fantastic marketer, but his day job is that he's an angel investor. His fund invests in over 100 companies a year. He's in companies you've heard of like Uber or Robinhood and Calm, and he just has a wealth of experience. So in this discussion, we're going to talk about some really, I think, relevant topics about the intersection of finance and tech and media and what's going on in the world today from his perspective. We all work for somebody or some people. He's going to share some insights about what's going on in the minds of CEOs right now. How are they dealing with this in this present age of efficiency, as he calls it? And how can you adapt to that using AI to your advantage? So there's a lot of practical tools coming out of this. Now, because he's a podcast creator, we're also going to talk about brand building and the importance of brand building in addition to the work of just generating leads and direct response and return on ad spend. How do you think about balancing those short-term needs with long-term goals and the importance of building a brand and how you do it from his perspective? One other thing we talk about just to look forward to is working with talent and making sure you find a host who really cares and who's really generous with their audience. But don't want to spend too much more time prefacing. Why don't we just get into it here? It's a wonderful conversation from a guy who's really seen the industry from every possible angle. So with that, enjoy this conversation with Jason Calacanis.
How are you doing?
Doing great. Thanks for coming all this way. We went through a couple of changes in venue.
That's okay. Nobody got robbed.
Nobody got robbed. I don't think so. Or at least they didn't make it into the room. And so...
this area is super safe and awesome.
Yeah, it's been good. Well, Jason everybody knows Jason, especially up here. But he's been somebody that I think has been long on podcast. You started Twist like 15 years ago.
Yeah.
Right?
First episode was in June of 2010. And then I had done for about a year before that something called Calacanis Cast, which was more my blog with an MP3 attachment to the RSS feed. But nobody had created the pod catcher software yet. And for people who don't know, podcasting, the word pod doesn't come from like a group of dolphins or something. It was because of the iPod, which is where podcasts were consumed originally before the iPhone came out. There's a famous clip of me on YouTube asking Steve Jobs at the Wall Street Journal conference if iTunes would support subscription podcasts at some point. And he said, it's a really good idea. Just email me, Jason. And I said, at the email I always email you at? And he said, yes. And everybody in the room laughed.
Yeah.
What they didn't realize was that I did trade emails with him somewhat often when I was the editor or the CEO of Engadget, which was his favorite blog. Wow. And I was recounting the story because he came to me and he said, your blog is the greatest blog ever. I read it. And, it gives me better competitive intelligence than any other blog. And blogs was like the big hip thing before podcasts. I said, it's incredible. And then I saw Walt Mossberg. I said, you're never going to believe this, Walt. I just met Steve Jobs, and you never guess what he said. And he said, that he reads your blog every day, and it's his favorite. I said, yeah, how did you know? He goes, he says that to everybody. That's one of my many Steve Jobs stories.
Not a bad one, not a bad one. Okay, so the theme here, we've been talking about all kinds of measurement and audio advertising, but we're going to go a little broader than that. We're going to talk tech, media, finance. So you invest in 150 companies a year. You've been in Uber, Robinhood, Calm, a lot of consumer brands, a lot of all kinds of brands. You were going to share something about that.
No, yeah, 100 new investments a year, and then between 25 and 50 follow-on investments. So we maybe increase our position in an existing company. Yeah.
Still not too shabby, even at 125. And
would make us, in the top 5 most active seed stage funds in the world.
Wow.
But it's by design. I mean, we could go a little faster, but the name of the game is to get more people applying for funding, but then keep the number of investments you do the same, so the bar keeps getting raised. Kind of like Harvard or Yale have done over the years, right? Just keep increasing demand, and then just keeps,
So, when you think about it, you've got a lot of different companies represented in this room, a lot of different brands, a lot of different marketers. What are the CEOs of those companies thinking about in this present stage, whether you want to call it post-COVID or this perma-crisis state that we live in? Things have been a little crazy the last few years. What are in people's minds as they're looking at the way that capital is moving?
Great question. So the last 2 years have been pretty chaotic in startup land and obviously in big companies. If many are at big companies, you've seen the rifts, return to office. Okay, we're not going to return to the office, or maybe we'll return to office, or you have to return to office, but the CEO's living in Hawaii. The CEO doesn't want to come back, so maybe we'll come back 3 days. And just like this whole charade. So you work at Facebook. I'm sorry, you work for Benioff. So a large number of CEOs who are coming back to work, and I'm like, I follow you on Instagram. I see you at Lake Tahoe. We went through an age of excess, as our industry, the technology industry, can do. And so the name of the game on the field during ZIRP, zero interest rate phenomenon, was to hire people for where you think you'd be next year. And if you're Google, you were hiring people, and they really pioneered this in order to keep competitors from having them. So, when I, met Larry and Sergey back in the day, they all of a sudden had this money printing machine, and Larry said to me at some point, what should we do with all the money? And I was like, what do you mean? He's like, well, we just got $10 billion now from profits, which this is early on. Now they make like $30 billion a quarter, some crazy number. And I said, well, you should invest it in startups or whatever, or venture firms, whatever. And he did actually start Google Ventures, but that is now being punished by Wall Street. And so that crazy cab company I was the third investor in went from losing. When I invested in it the first couple of years, it was making a ton of money, hand over fist, because it was only Lincoln Town Cars, and then they got into that battle, and they lost money, but they gained this incredible market share. And, just in the last year, you may have seen the stock go from $20 to $82 today or something. I don't track it that often, $81.75. It's getting very hard to stay employed. I'm just like, I told my wife, if that thing ever hits 70, I'm retiring. She was like, I'm not going to retire. So what's happening is, people are saying, let's do more with less. And are there people in this organization who, are super qualified and they get shit done? Great, put them in this quadrant, and then there's the other quadrants. And so, that started really with Elon and the takeover of Twitter. And so he asked me to come, hang out for the first month or so at Twitter and just, shadow him and talk about strategy and whatever. And he said, what we have to figure out in this company is, because they were going to do a massive riff, and he's been public about this, so I'm not speaking out of school here, but they were going to cut like 25% of the company. And, he said, I got to cut like 50% of this company at least, because it's going to run out of money, and I own it now. And so he said, I need to know who's incredible at their job and who's essential, like actually doing essential work. And I said, okay. And it's like and people who aren't working and who are not good at their jobs, I'm like, well, that's the easiest, to get rid of. And then there's the other quadrants, like somebody's qualified, but they're not doing essential work. Well, maybe we could find some work for them to do. And we just drew 4 quadrants, right? And we have to find people in this quadrant. And we went on that adventure to figure that out. But he got eventually rid of 85% of the people in that business, and they started shipping product faster. So now, since he did that, that gave air cover. And then Zuckerberg cut 10,000 people. I saw him do that. I bought the stock at $94. Stock went up 50% within a couple of months, and now it's trading at 400 something. He cut another 10,000. And so now it's the age of efficiency. And, that's how our industry works. When people start getting rewarded something, everybody runs to that side of the boat, right? And it'll come back, and people will start getting frisky. I would say right now, people are feeling optimistic again about 2024. And they are looking at, and startups are really a better indicator of what the big companies are eventually going to do, because startups are resource constrained. Because they're resource constrained, they only have 6 months or 12 months of revenue. They have to do the most efficient thing possible. They're ruthless in that way. And so I started to see this trend in these companies that we invest in every year. I'd say, okay, you have 12 people and you're burning $30,000 a month. Are you not paying people or whatever? And like, oh, no. We have our customer support teams in Sao Paulo. Our SDRs, our sales development reps, they're in Manila. We've replaced these group of people with a script in using Zapier and connecting it to Notion and then Typeform, and we built this glue, and we laid that person off, and we replaced them with technology. And so they were automating, delegating to low-cost centers in the world, and deprecating. So I just wrote this ADD framework. And I told my portfolio companies, here's what I'm saying. You need to look at everything you're doing, automate it if you can, delegate it to another place in the world. A third party might be able to do it for you, like outsource it, or stop doing it if it's not essential. And that's become the addiction. Now things are becoming profitable. What happens when things become profitable? People look at the cash and they're like, what do we do with all this cash? Back to the Larry here, just like, oh, I don't know, let's try to grow this business again. Yeah. And I feel like this will be the final year of making the cuts and the efficiency, and then I feel like this is the year where people are going to be like, should we launch a new product? Maybe we should spend some money on marketing, or like, maybe we should double the number of salespeople, because these salespeople are pretty rad. Also, there's a lot of dirty little secrets. In our industry, people got really big comp packages when there was that crazy competition. Yeah. And so this is kind of sinister, cutthroat, but this is the truth. They're just looking at everybody's comp, and they're like, this person's been here 8 years. We gave them raises every year. We gave them stock options. You know what? We're eliminating this position. And then they're like, you know what? If you want to reapply for your position. And so this has been happening at Google. People are being asked to reapply for their positions with half the amount of stock options and 2/3 of comp. Mm-hmm. And so a lot of this has been about, I think, resetting some salaries. You're nodding. You may have seen this happen. And so that's pretty gnarly. But listen, it is what it is. And then a competition will emerge for the best people again. But I do think this AI thing is very real. Yeah. And the best people in the industry are showing me stuff, and I'm investing in stuff that's making me go, well, that's a lot of work. So we invested in a company this year, Podcast AI. And I had always had this dream of hiring a twist archivist. And it was going to be somebody who would somebody for $2 a minute to transcribe the episodes, and every day just, make a beautiful web page with the transcript on it, right? And it was very hard to get transcripts. So that was going to cost about $1,000 an episode. And I was like, well, we have 2,000 episodes, or at the time we had maybe 1,500. So I was like, all right, yeah, maybe I'll spend this amount of money doing it. I'll spend $1 million doing this. It'd be worth it because everybody gets so much value. And we'll eventually make the money back from SEO traffic, whatever. And then this company came to us, and they did it with software. It does all the chapter headings. It does a perfect transcript. It finds the keywords. It finds the themes, and then you can highlight the clip that you want. A consumer can go to the website, highlight the clip, and then just hit publish and go share a clip. And I'm super excited about clips. I'm thinking like I'm going to just start doing clips a lot, like original content, not clipping the pod, but just adding a new feature. I was watching Bill Simmons the other day, and he's old, like me. And, old guys were supposed to walk. So he's like walking around his neighborhood in Brentwood or wherever he is, Manhattan Beach. I don't know where he lives exactly, but and he just like holds out his camera and it's like shaking. And have you seen it? And he's just like, yeah, I was just thinking about like LeBron James going to the Warriors, like, yeah, da, 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 and that's like a head game or whatever. And then he just ends. And I've been watching him do it. He's been doing it for 2 weeks, 3 weeks, and I'm like, no makeup. No sound person, no video. I don't know if he might be just sending the file to somebody and they polish it in 30 minutes. But I was like, that's the future. I'm just going to walk around and make 90-second clips of hot takes and it'll probably get as many views or, it'll be like some very interesting addition to podcasting. And shorts on YouTube are going bonkers. We've been doing these like AI demos and all of a sudden we got like 4,000 new subscribers to the YouTube channel in a week or something. And I was like, what happened? They're like, oh yeah, we did a clip of this like really cool AI demo and it went viral and got 10 million views and it spilled over and we got some number of subscribers. Oh, that's interesting. Why don't we do every Monday 5 AI demos? And so now we're doing 5. So it's like kind of influenced my thinking as a podcaster. We're like, oh yeah, long form, you interview somebody for 90 minutes. That's cool, that's groovy, but I also want to get like some of these younger folks and they just want to bite-sized stuff. Like I've had people say to me, I love All In. I'm like, oh yeah, where do you listen? Spotify, whatever? It's like, no, I just TikTok. I'm like, we don't have TikTok. It's like, yeah, no, I just see the clips on TikTok. And I'm like, so be it. So now, speaking of advertisers, I told my team, put these clips out. You've seen us do this. And now everybody's copied my format, but I will put out the clip, 6 minutes, whatever, put the ad read at the end. And then in the follow-up tweet, or in the follow-up LinkedIn, or the first comment on LinkedIn, I think, put who was our partner and put their URL.
So that's available for sponsorship?
I just included in the ads.
Yep.
I'm in a very lucky position that this is not my primary job, and the ads have been sold out for over 10 years, and we don't charge a lot for them. And we have people like Squarespace or LinkedIn or
I keep trying to get more inventory from you. It's hard.
Well, this is the problem.
You loosen up a little bit.
You can become a victim of your own success. It was this week in startups, like this week, not every day in startups. And I told this ad sales team, like, we sold out. We're 4 months sold out. I was like, okay, you can add a day. And they're like, okay, we added a second day. And, they come back like, whatever, 6 months later. Okay, we're sold out 2 days a week. And we got to 6 days a week. And then I started All In. So I was doing 7 days a week. That was a little too much. So now I'm down to 4 days a week this week in startups, 1 day for All In.
So you talked about your ADD formula, and you put out a very good article about that, which is something we're looking at implementing in our company and available for anybody here that's interested. Tell me if you think this is wishful thinking, but when we all woke up to the fact that AI is here and it's real now, the precious asset was engineering talent, right? It was so hard for people to get their hands on good engineers. And now it kind of feels like we all kind of have a team of engineers if we really want to. Do you feel like there's a shift in the value of having some disruptive technology to now actually having a brand? Is actual brand building now much more important than it used to be?
Yeah, I would argue it's always been really important. And then maybe because people felt resource constrained because there were so few developers and they were so expensive. But two things happened at the same time. When we all started working from home, all the managers learned how to manage remote teams. Now, developers were pretty good at that, but then they became excellent at it. And then managers became excellent at it. Then people started using all these offshore developers. The offshore developers were the first to use co-pilots because they were trying to catch up to the developers here who were able to sit next to somebody at Google or Facebook or Uber and say, hey, show me how to do this. And so now it's like, you're right, it's been democratized and we're seeing, a lot of companies are able to produce product quicker and faster. You'll be, at this time next year, if you're not a developer in the room, the same way you can throw up a Squarespace website and make something beautiful on the internet, I predict you'll be able to talk to Squarespace or talk to Typeform and say, here's my goal. Mm-hmm. I want to do a survey. You guys were talking about surveys before. Here's what I want the end result to be, and I want to publish it here, and I want a beautiful PDF, and it'll kind of just do it all for you. And you won't have to go into the interface and pick all the categories and do all that. Like it's here. It's real. It's just, you got to trust but verify. A lot of the output isn't polished enough for corporate. But it's getting there. And I see it when young people like write deal memos. I can tell if they wrote it themselves or if they use ChatGPT. And I'm like, this is ChatGPT because I read it out loud and it sounds awkward. Like you can use Chat. It's really good if you write something and then you highlight it and say, make it more concise. Like I'm in love with Grammarly.
One of the things I'm working with Chat on is just giving it personas that are real people who have a lot on record. So I was like going to present something to my team, and I wanted to see what Chat would say. And then I said, okay, rewrite this in the voice of David Ogilvy. And it completely did it.
Wow.
Which was super cool. Now, it can't do that for everybody, but there are people it can if there's enough on record.
Yeah, exactly. Yeah, make this, rewrite this RFP in the voice of Tony Soprano. This is gonna be some great hits for you. Oh. Yeah.
Okay, so if I'm in this room, I'm a marketer. I just heard you say two things that are contradictory to execute, which is we're in this age of efficiency, and we're going to be here for a minute. And, we all have to figure out how do we show high returns on any investment. But we're also talking about the value of branding. And, there's the work that most of us are doing that are like, okay, how many sales did we make from this unit that happened today and I need a payback in the next 7 days, right? That's not necessarily the most effective way to build a brand. Building a brand can take time and faith and resources. And if that's truly valuable, how do I, as a marketer, convince my company to back me in that sort of exercise?
Yeah, I think consistency is super important in brand building. I just think about my personal brand and showing up on a consistent basis, helping founders grow their companies. And, it takes some intentionality. So I think there's something, I told this to the All In guys when they were like, how do we make this podcast successful? I was like, show up every week. And they're like, yeah, but what if we want to grow faster? I was like, show up prepared.
You said that to me, by the way. We started in 2020. You were kind to come on when we were just starting to do it. And I'm like, well, what can we do better? And you're like, why don't we talk after you've done a few hundred of these?
Yeah.
And now we have. And there's a clear difference. And even if nobody's listening, it's such a good exercise to figure out how to work out a thought. But, showing up.
Showing up, and I got that from Peter Rojas at Engadget, who I'd stolen him from this new blog, Gizmodo, and he was doing it for a couple of months, and I was like, I stole him, I gave him equity, all this kind of great stuff. And I said, what do you think the secret to blogging is when we were trying to figure out that medium? And he said, showing up every day. And I was like, okay. He said, yeah, and then not giving up. And then I said, and not giving up, because some other folks had stopped publishing to their blog. And that was like the big problem with blogs, if you remember in the early, and this is all part of like, I think how media has evolved is it's about voices that go direct credibly to individuals, as opposed to where I started. I had a magazine, as some of you know, Silicon Valley Reporter, and we were journalists and we tell other people's stories and then, try to communicate them to the audience. So we were like a proxy. We were, people, we were the distribution. People wanted to tell the stories, they had to go through us. But now experts are going direct, and that's really been the real trend is experts going direct to audiences. And experts are quirky and weird, and like they may just stop doing their podcast, right? You've seen this, like really amazing people are just like, yeah, I'm done. I did it. And it's like, no, don't stop. We love it. And they're like, yeah, no, I'm quixotic. I'm successful. Why would I keep going? You're like, okay. And so that was happening in blogging a lot. Somebody would blog for 6 months, everybody become addicted, and they'd be like, yeah, I'm just going to stop. And so that was the big innovation of our company was we decided to put 3 people on each blog. And, that really built the brands because then the 3 people had to say, well, what does Engadget stand for? What does Autoblog stand for? What does Joystick? Okay, we're not going to do hardware reviews, but we're going to do this. We're going to do this. We're not going to give it a rating. We're going to talk about what the most important features are, because we have a higher end audience, right? And so that, you really have to think that through. With This Week in Startups, I've always tried to keep it very high level for people who are in the industry and not water it down. Now that's just a conscious choice. We could water it down and make it more like, a generic, entrepreneurship show and talk about less technical things. And you might gain audience, but it's not the audience that I'm interested in, and it's not the audience that the advertisers are probably interested in, which is, medium-sized businesses that are getting off the ground and picking their SaaS software, picking their lawyer, and then they lock into those things for 5 or 10 years, and they go from, 2 employees to 200 to 2,000 to 20,000. That's kind of that's the stories we like to tell. And I think if you're talking to your CEO or the founders of the company, it's really about having a thoughtful multi-year brand. What do you want people to think about this brand after they buy the first car? And then when they get the next car, why would they buy the second car? And if they're using our SaaS software, do they know who built it? Do they know the cadence in which we release new features? And how do we communicate to them that we're like not this impersonal company, but we actually have people who work here who care about, our customers, right? And I think that's, showing people that you actually care, right? And how much you care is like so critical in building a brand. And when it comes to a brand, it seems crazy, but, how does LinkedIn care about their users? And, I try to, sounds corny, but I appreciate the support I get. I try to communicate to the audience that hey, they've made this incredible place for professionals, and that's a great place for you to market or look for people. And here's how you can do that. And so I think it's really about consistently showing people you care and just relentlessly reinforcing that the product or service you provide is getting better too. Those are the 2 things I see people miss, is that personalization of what they're doing, why they're doing it. Grammarly keeps dropping cool new features, and all these companies are constantly dropping cool new features, and I'm like, you have these features, but it's not in the ad copy. And they're like, yeah, just freestyle, JCal, just freestyle it. And so we have we came up with a system. If you want me to read it verbatim, my team puts it in yellow. If you want me to freestyle it, it's not highlighted in yellow. And so, people now trust me with the ad reads to just freestyle it. And I always look at the product and try to figure out what are people talking about and or I'll have my team do that too. What are people buzzing about with this product?
Okay, pop quiz. Have you ever heard of these companies? Shopify, Bayer, Oracle, Indeed, Masterclass, Babbel, Tommy John. We could go on. I don't just host the Media Roundtable podcast, but I have the good fortune of being the CEO of a company called Oxford Road, where we are the world's leading independently owned and operated agency specializing in audio. Think podcasts, radio, and streaming. And what that means is that we get to help great companies worth fighting for, grow with audio advertising, whether it's podcasts, radio, or streaming, and all its various tentacles. This includes media planning and buying. We do analytics, attribution, and insights. We also have a special way that we deal with creative and copy generation. It's our own proprietary process called Audiolytics that allows us to score ads for their persuasiveness. Bottom line is we don't just work here. Audio is our passion, and we want to lead this industry to new heights beyond what we've ever seen so far. That's why we've been leading the industry in brand safety and suitability and actually bringing you solutions to market so that you can evaluate the way that you get placed in a show so that it matches up with your values, in addition to avoiding the things that might be problematic for your brand. If you're a chief audio officer and you're looking to get best in market performance at maximum viable scale, do get in touch with us at oxfordroad.com. Or if you love audio and are strategic, relentless, and looking for a career change, consider joining our mission as a fellow agent of influence. Just flip us your resume through oxfordroad.com. And if you're working anywhere in the audio industry and you're serious about this business, make sure you go to oxfordroad.com, easy to spell. Sign up for our free newsletter, The Influencer, at oxfordroad.com. And make sure you mention that you heard about us on the Media Roundtable podcast.
It's so interesting because I think marketers have so much pressure on them for the needs of today, and to take that long view and do something that is over the horizon and when it's going to pay off. And I think about, there is so much buzz about branded podcasts, and I've seen companies about the most obscure things going, well, we should just start a podcast and it'll be like Rogan and then it'll be a revenue stream for us. And it sounds like you've gone from just doing something in the shadows before people knew what a podcast was. And now what you've done with This Week in Startups, and now you went to a new level with All In, right? I mean, you really have a smash hit with that.
It's bizarre. Starting your own podcast is hard. And you really need to be dedicated. You need to get to 100 episodes. So I encourage people to do it and give it a shot. But it's going to be hard. It's not easy. And it's very crowded now. Back in the day, it was like, what do I listen to? And it's like, well,
there's like 5 million in the library, but only about 200,000 get produced every week.
Yeah, and then audiences like to click in. It's very habit forming. So that's the thing I've learned is people really want to get something every day or every Friday, and they will watch it on Saturday when they're on the treadmill. They kind of get into a rhythm. If you are like me and you listen, I grew up on Meet the Press and McLaughlin Group. I don't know what that says about me, but I just, for some reason, when I was young and I was growing up in Brooklyn, I was like, these people are powerful and important. I should listen to what they say. And on Sundays, there were no cartoons, so I just started listening to McLaughlin Group. And I used a little McLaughlin Group-esque moderation techniques. He's very curmudgeonly and combative. But that's kind of like a Sunday tradition for people, right? And people, and it used to be Thursdays for NBC, Hill Street Blues, whatever. People Sundays now for HBO. So I think that's also important, is that people want that consistency in your life and the habit of it. When thinking about branding, I think about it like there's some attributable stuff that's kind of soulless and important. Like I got my click-through ads on Google search or whatever, right? It's like you lock it in, you can sit there and walk out over it. And then there's like fun, interesting stuff that conveys emotion and, in a more trusted way. And I think you just got to mix those two things together. The challenge has always been attribution, of course, because, rich people or affluent people or people working in companies, people are like, we're going to give people 5% off their first 3 months. I'm like, that's like an abstraction for people. Like, they don't know what that means. So we were one of the first podcasts to say, I would just tell people, just say $1,000 in credits. How much did the average person spend with you a year? $10,000? Great. Just give them $1,000 in credit. Don't say $10. Say $1,000 in credits. And that really helped. But, or I'd say, have a startup program. They're like, what's a startup program? And I'd be like, look at Zendesk startup program, zendesk.com/startups. Look at HubSpot's one. It just shows that you made a landing page on the internet. That means you care about startups and that you're going to give them all this stuff. And you probably are giving it to them already. If they ask for training or if they ask for a white paper or they ask for feedback on their product, you would probably give it to them anyway. So why not make a landing page and then call it your startup package? And some people have done incredible things. Like if you're under $10 million in money raised or under 100 employees, you can use our software free. Very disruptive kind of concepts like that. But the problem is, people don't remember sometimes where they heard of something, and they need to hear it 3 or 4 times. So there's a lot of nuance to building that. But we all listen to podcasts here, and we all hear the ads over and over again. And then sometimes you're in a rush, you'll fast forward 30 seconds, and you may only catch 15 seconds of it, but you're like, yep. NetSuite cares about this podcast. Yep, I know NetSuite. Yep, remember these 3 numbers. Like you're kind of dialed into it, right? I remember. Yeah, NetSuite. That's what this is for. Got it. Boom. And it just keeps that like presence of mind. And then people also like that you're loyal to a brand because they have an affinity for me or Tim Ferriss or whoever. And it's like, yeah, Squarespace has been with J. Cal for the longest. That's kind of cool, right? And so there's a kind of coolness to getting it and understanding a podcast. That's why I like to do podcasts. Like I'll tell people, I'll be your 10th guest. Do like 9, get warmed up. I'll be your 10th. And they're like, why 10th? I'm like, just get warmed up. Like you're going to lose 2 of the first 9. They have audio problems, but
you're just going to talk to their family and a couple of friends.
I'll be your 10th.
The first one, yeah.
And I like to kind of do them early and get my investment early. Like,
So I want to open it up to questions from the group. One through line I'm hearing, You're in this class over here. You're investing in businesses. You have a brand. You are a brand. But I think there's connective tissue between what everybody in the room is facing that I just want to underscore, which is, being generous up front with the customer. If you're writing an ad, if you have a consumer product, giving people a way to engage with you by being generous with them that you don't need an immediate return on it. And we might call that content marketing, right? But creating a funnel that just doesn't go, hey, I'm Dan, want to get married? It's like, how do you just start to come in a little softer, build a relationship, take the long view, and give them that, make that first step a little bit easier. And in B2B marketing especially, it's so important that you understand your job is not to close the sale the first time you meet somebody. It's to get them to raise their hand and say, I'm willing to engage with you a little bit further. I'll take a little step toward you.
Yeah, the PDF is great. The webinar is great. All that stuff, top of the funnel. I think all that stuff's great, especially if you understand the audience and you're giving them something. We like to do little fun contests. So I'm always trying to do something fun that has integrity. So I don't like to sell access to myself, but I do like to give access to founders. So, we have like a cool company that does the .tech domains, and they're like, we want to have 5 people come on the podcast. I'm like, yeah, we don't do that. We don't sell podcast slots. I'm like, well, what can we do? And I was like, how about I mentor 5 founders, and I just give them advice about their startups, and it's brought to you by .tech domains, and they have to have a .tech domain. So if they buy a $6 domain, then they get put into this random pool. My producers will pick the ones. Like, okay, can we pick them? I'm like, nope, you can't pick them. But we want them to editorially earn it. But that seems reasonable to me, right? And so I like to do like fun things like that. So I always encourage people, like, think about like a contest or something fun, and like maybe it works, maybe it doesn't. We did like Show Us Your Squarespace, and we just got the domain name showusyoursquarespace.com or whatever. And I just said, hey, listen, we're gonna make a beautifully designed website, and we'll pick the best one, and we'll give you like $1,000 in Squarespace credits, which is like enough for years of whatever. And, we'll tweet your website, and everybody can just go to this URL. And we had the URL, showusyoursquarespace.com, I think it was, go to a tweet I did. And so I just said, it'll send you to a tweet, just reply and show us your website. Like a couple hundred people did it. And so for like marketers, it's like, oh, there is somebody hearing the message, right? Mm-hmm. And that's kind of what you want, signs of life, signs that something's going on here. But it's not easy being a marketer, because you got all these people who, they're like, what does the CEO want us to say? What does the sales team want us to say? The product manager. It's like Franken copy sometimes we get.
Yes.
I call it Franken copy.
Yeah.
And I'm like,
familiar with it.
I'm like, this is 4 different messages, like, and you want me to read this and try to convey 4 messages in 75 seconds? Like, this seems like, like a Robin Williams stand-up bit where he's just like changing characters every 15 seconds. Like, let's pick 1, maybe 2 messages to try to get across in 75 fucking seconds. Like, yeah.
Well, listen, thank you. And
Thanks
please
for having
thank
me.
Jason.
Great to come here.
I hope you feel the way I do. This was an awesome discussion that we had with Jason, and we're so grateful that he was willing to take the time to come meet with us in person and share his perspective specifically with chief audio officers. If you're interested in Jason's ADD framework for how you can automate, deprecate, or delegate tasks, I think it's a good resource, and just Google it. You'll be able to find his framework. But really good stuff here. Some of the other things just to call out that came out of this episode are what a massive opportunity there is in the market right now, because you can test things, you can market things and try things cheaper than ever, and you don't have to guess what people are interested in responded to. That was one of the key points that he made. He also called out, worth reiterating, that it's important for all of us, whether you're the chief audio officer or an agency, or even on the publishing side in sales, look for chances to take big swings creatively with your ad partners. And if you start the conversation and just be open about, collaborating with the team that's executing the ads, give them a chance to think a little bit, and it's amazing to see where that conversation will take you. Finally, we talked about something that I think plagues all of us that work with audio influencers, and that is, a lot of people that read ad copy sound like they're doing a chore. They sound like they have some kind of contempt for the audience. And conversely, Jason, I think, has modeled and continues to model through This Week in Startups and some of his other properties, just the idea of being generous with your audience, really showing them that you care, finding ways to go the extra mile, go out of pocket periodically and find creative ways to make sure that the advertiser knows that they are important to you, so that when you talk about them, there's real authenticity in how you talk about them, and avoid those shows that are just going to take your sponsorship for granted. So, wonderful episode. Share it with a friend. Just want to thank you again for joining the Media Roundtable. And this podcast, as all of our episodes, are brought to you by Oxford Road, where we want you to succeed in audio and to use your influence for good. And just remember, we're all part of this marketing community, and we have the power to advance voices that don't just entertain, but also edify, and to build bridges across our differences for the sake of preserving fair-minded discussion on the most important topics of our age. If you're a marketer and you're looking to align your brand values with extraordinary business outcomes, reach out to our agency, Oxford Road. Just go to oxfordroad.com and subscribe to our weekly newsletter, The Influencer. And we'd love to hear from you. Give us any feedback, suggestions you have. Please don't hesitate to reach out to us, info@mediaroundtable.com. I'll see it. Lots of people will see it. And we will take your feedback seriously. If you want to get even deeper in the weeds on the craft of creating the creative, because we know that's just part of the way that you're successful in audio, but the creative is important. We have a monthly show that comes out by our very own Stu Redwine, head of creative services at Oxford Road. It's called Ad Infinitum, and it is Oxford Road's audio creative focused podcast. Start at episode 1 to get a better understanding of what makes audio ads work and how they can work better. In each episode, you're going to find that they're breaking down recent audio ads in the market from top spenders in podcast, radio, streaming, or even satellite radio. And they're going to give them a critique. I think you'll learn a lot about how to make your ads work better when you listen to Ad Infinitum. Special thanks to all the people that worked so hard to make this come together. That includes you, Bianca, Kyle, Haley, Ezra, Mary Jane, Everett, Neil, and the team at Podcast One. And as always, influence responsibly.